Hooray! It's the Happy Times and Places podcast. It's actually just Happy Times and Places. There's no the. There is, though, Toby Hadoke. That's me, commentating along to episodes and trying to see if I can guess what my special guest's favourite things about them are.
Hello, I'm Martin Geraghty and I'm one of the long-standing artists on the Doctor Who magazine comic strip, and more recently a member of the animation team on the Missing Episodes productions. Toby has very kindly asked me to contribute to his podcast, and the story I've chosen is The Horror of Fang from 1977.
Well, welcome everybody. It's time for the final episode of Horror of Fang, the one that features The Ballad of Fladden Isle by William Wilfred Gibson, which we studied at school. And I don't know if I knew it first and was impressed that it turned up in Doctor Who, because it's, of course, the last thing in the book, and indeed the last thing in the episode, or whether I knew it from the book. We did it at junior school. We did it quite early, but it's a wonderful, wonderful poem. I actually read it for we need stuff to go in the sort of advert break, as it were, of Excess Malarkey when we were doing it during the plague, and I'd occasionally just do something random that I just thought would be quite fun to do and that would fill the space and that was copyright free because we were on Twitch. So I did the Ballad of Fladden Isle. Thoroughly enjoyed it. What a great poem. Anyway, and it serves as a wonderful inspiration for this, and a wonderful moody coda, as we will see. But before we go in, a nod to my very special guest, Martin Geraghty, who is a very gifted artist whose work you will have seen in Doctor Who magazine and in the Doctor Who DVD range, where he designs a lot of the characters to be animated. He's a very humble and nice fellow who wears his talent lightly and is as much of a fan as the rest of us. So what a joy that he's chosen such an excellent story, and he's been an advocate for it that I would say is on my wavelength, which I'm encouraged by. And I think I got a soupçon of a point for episode 1. Don't think I quite got for episode 2, even though we'd skirted around the same areas. We did share a point for episode 3. So it's all to play for, because episode 4, as regular listeners will know, the final episode requires me to come up with a bonus thing as well as my favourite thing from this episode. So I'm going to accentuate the positive whilst swimming through the bloodbath that is Horror of Fang episode 4. And let's see what joy I can glean from the Doctor Who story with the highest casualty rate percentage-wise of its characters. In that, yes, there are stories where more people die, but there aren't stories where just this once, Rose, everybody dies. So let us. I'm just gonna line this up and go back, and I'm on BritBox. You may be on the DVD. Not the Blu-ray, as I record this. No such thing exists, but I believe they will all be out one day. So I've lined up Horror of Fang Part 4, and we are going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So what joy. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because this very much feels more like the Holmes and Hinchcliffe era than it does the Graham Williams era, which is more light-hearted, which is, frankly, has, as time goes on, less good production values. Poor old Graham Williams was clobbered not only by the fact that I think Tom Baker pushed him about a bit. Tom Baker himself gets a bit more wayward, I think, as time goes on and as he gets a little bit bored. And there is an element of Tom Baker that tests you. I know this from I love him. He's my childhood hero. He's been very kind to me as an actor and as somebody I've had the pleasure of doing professional engagements with and alongside. and as an email correspondent. But, I think he likes to test people. I've certainly had that experience where I've had to go, he's not making this easy. And he's quite enjoying not making this easy. And I don't think he knows he does it, but he can. So that, he's a complicated figure. And I didn't quite realise how scary he was as a doctor. When I was a kid, I just loved him because he was Doctor Who and he was funny and he was otherworldly and he had wide eyes and was exciting. But it's that extra element of danger that he gives that really makes him. So poor old Vince here, having had quite a big part of the drama, is polished off almost immediately that this episode begins. And I think that's very, very sad because he's a lovely, lovely character. But I suppose he thematically signed his death warrant by taking Lord Palmerdale's money. And that's kind of, he's out of the drama then. If you look at what he actually does in the story, it's not an awful lot, come episodes once Palmerdale's gone. So I suppose... needed to get him. I remember Tom Baker being quite admiring of Louise's using of the shovel here, saying that a lesser actress would have been more assured in the using of it, and he's quite right. But yeah, so poor old Vince has gone, and this means something for the credit. I've just remembered when I started watching old episodes, I think episode 4 of this was on a tape with something else. So episode 4 was the first episode of this I watched. And then I watched episodes 1 to 3 later. God, why do I ruin things for myself? So yes, that's right, because the credits for this are in a slightly different order. They do a rare thing, because normally, characters are, unless it's order of appearance, which is what happens in the 60s. This is a good idea. I like that Leela's coming up with a good idea. The credits here, they decide to shove Vince and Lord Palmerdale a bit further down because Vince dies early and Lord Palmerdale is dead. So that the actors that do a little bit more move up the credits. So that seems to me logical and sensible. But that's unusual. Usually if you're second guest credited actor, you are throughout your appearances. There are anomalies. I've accounted for them all in my... I've also done a podcast on credit order in Doctor Who because I'm a terrible, terrible example of humanity. All of this dialogue and interaction between the Doctor and Leela is great. That's the beautiful thing about episodes. Look at that. As he's reasoning, he's not only getting out the exposition and going, right, what I've got to work out what's happening. He gives it that real sort of visceral import as he realizes the consequences. So I don't know. I can't remember the details of why this was the first episode of this I watched, but I think in retrospect that was a shame. But it was that thing of if I'd got it and it was available and I got to experience the characters and what it looked like, then I would. Which seemed more important to me than sort of experiencing the story in order. Poor old Harker. And we must fight for our lives. Poor old... But even that isn't played too stupid. Even though you've got Leela sort of casting her eyes skyward, I still sort of believe it. Adelaide is from a particular time period and is highly strung. And actually during this process... I remember once with a friend talking through and go, is there a Doctor Who performance? Is there a Doctor Who story that doesn't have at least one bad performance in it? This was years ago we were doing this. And we usually found one. I would be more generous now. And that was an effect that I never thought that quite worked. I know it's been slightly tarted up for the remastering, but actually that looks pretty good. But again, Ruben is doing what Skinsale did in the previous episode, where he's sort of just... casting his eyes slightly downwards or in a slightly different direction, he would see the thing he's looking for, but he doesn't bother. But it's a sort of television staging thing that you get used to. But and I remember my friend saying, "Oh no, Adelaide in Horror Fang Rock." When I said, "Oh, there's nobody bad in Horror Fang Rock," I actually think I've really appreciated her in this. I loving Colin Douglas's terrible face, which I've not really thought about too much before when I watched this. You just go, well, it's just being the alien, but actually that sort of cadaverous grimace, it's sort of bright-eyed and it's cheerful, but it's also like a death mask, and that juxtaposition is greatly Doctor Who. Cheerful death, that's Doctor Who. Death and laughter. And you've got all this plot stuff going on with the Doctor here, because he's got that beacon and all of that, which is actually less important to the story than the sort of the characters in peril here. So poor old Adelaide there gets, she's not particularly much use to the story anymore. So she's gone. But I think Annette Woolett actually did a really good job with a hard character there. She's supposed to be annoying, but she doesn't ever make you think, oh God, I'm uncomfortable watching this. I'm annoyed watching this. She's annoying to exactly the right level and the right pitch. And they, as I say, they even get away with it with the sort of wah, 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 she's fainted and Leela's slightly annoyed. It's real. I believe it. Now, this is, I think, probably where there's a weakness in the story, isn't there? With where we now have... Now, every time I've watched it before, it's felt like 10 minutes. It's probably about 3. But where he's going to change them. And I remember this line from the book. I remember Reuben the Rutan. So that then when from flicking through it, so that then, of course, when I started reading it, I knew where Reuben is actually, the sort of the main protagonist in the lighthouse, really, in the first episode. To me, his card was always marked. He was always the bad guy, even though he's not actually a bad guy at the beginning. So again, that's another example of when you come at these stories not fresh because you've read about them, or you've read about the characters, or you've read the book, or you've read the episode endings in the DWM episode guides. Again, to come to this stuff fresh. But then again, when I discovered the things about them for the first time, oh boy, they were exciting. Now, the proportions aren't great here. It's not quite rationalized properly. There's actually nothing wrong with the monster. I like the sort of wispy white stuff and the fact that the green, the green, as Terence Dix would say, is not just green. It's got the sort of luminescence and the fluorescence about it. I think that's an intelligent choice. But and this has got some wonderfully, well, we'd say Holmesian, wouldn't we? But Terence Dix is, I think, not given as much credit for being equally good with world building and with jokes as Robert Holmes. It's just that Dix writes fewer actual scripts. And I don't like your face either. But all this stuff about Mutter's spiral and all of that. And the fact that they've decided to go, and actually, why don't we have the monster as the monster that fights with the Sontarans? I can't quite rationalise if I think about it. And I know Shakedown decided to, the spin-off video, had the Sontarans and the Rutans in it together, but the Rutans in it together. But Doctor Who has never had that face-off, and they do seem to be from different genres, really. The sort of warlike, clone, militaristic Sontarans, and the shape-shifting jellyfishes. Although Dix does in the dialogue that he gives, by them referring to themselves as a group entity and a we, and all of this, and there is some militaristic stuff about the mothership and all of this. That does give them a sort of certain speech patterns that make them seem perhaps more militaristic than a shape-shifting jellyfish kind of suggests. It's a bit like in Cold War when the Ice Warrior becomes, a thing scuttling through the air ducts. It's sort of like, I'm a bit. Those two things seem to me to be slightly incompatible. Why have you got the big armored militaristic thing being that monster? In the same way as you go, why have you decided that the one to be the arch enemy of the Sontarans is the one that seems slightly, they don't quite match in this in the same way. But I like it because what it buys us is a nice little thing that just knits the Doctor Who universe together. This could just be a monster called a Zing Zong or whatever, but the fact that Dix has made it connect with the Sontarans, even though their connection with the Sontarans has nothing to do with the story or its denouement or anything to do with it. It's just like it's like the bit in The Awakening where they find the tin clavic. It just ties it in for no other reason than just to knit the Doctor Who universe together. And I like that. It doesn't, non-regular viewers, it will go over there. They won't think they've not been privy to something, and regular viewers get a nice little moment. But I got through the big chat of. I remember it's in the Tom Baker years, isn't it? Where I think they have that bit on the video, and he goes, "Oh, that's got a lot of chat." And I think he does kind of point out that the story does kind of stop while the Doctor and the Rutan sort of explain stuff to each other. But it's Tom Baker doing it, so it's okay, and it's our first proper look at the monster. Even though, as I say, the proportions are slightly mixed. I'll live with it, but I think it is a slight Achilles heel in the day. Right, and here he says it's an early Shmerly, and I think it's pronounced Shermerly, but that's Tom Baker going, wouldn't it be witty if I said early Shmerly? As he's also said, I'll say chameleon factor, even though, because it's about shape-shifting, it has to be chameleon because he's referring to, and I know a chameleon doesn't change. Somebody's written in when I was talking about Silver Nemesis. But, chameleons are famous for blending in with their surroundings or changing colour or whatever. And the chameleon circuit is the TARDIS blending in with its surroundings. So the chameleon factor is about changing shape, is about adapting to your environment. And he's said that lovely thing earlier about, they bred in the sea but adapted to land. And so it's this. So that ties in actually very nicely with the idea of, well, why is it a shapeshifter? Oh, because it's a creature that has gone through an evolutionary process, and maybe part of that is now, if its evolutionary process means that it has a sympathy with being able to, bend its shape around its surroundings in order to camouflage itself, or whatever, and that gives us the who goes there, the devil amongst us, the who can we trust element of this story, which could have been actually played slightly more. It's not like the thing where there's suspicion on everyone around the corner, but it does give us the lovely cliffhanger and a way of having the creature among them in the shape of Reuben. But it's not it's not as at the forefront as the shape shifting of, say, the Zygons. But it's a nice extra element that fits, and it fits within the actually quite complex jigsaw of what appears on the surface quite a simple story. And I love that Tom Baker makes Leela smile there, because it's a brilliant idea. And it means that the lighthouse becomes the key to the destruction of the alien, which ties in with the theme of electricity and makes the setting more than just window dressing. And then you've got the diamonds that add to that, the diamonds that have been the cause of the dishonesty and the duplicity and the flaws in these characters, but diamonds tie in with light, and that becomes a focusing thing for the light beam. And it's brilliant. That is so crackingly plotted and fits together so brilliantly. It's a wonderful flourish to make the ending all tie together so neatly and appropriately. But yes, Tom Baker saying early Shmerly and chameleon factor is because I've noticed it, and he does this with certain words on occasion. And you can, and in Nightmare of Eden, he's going, well, I'll say Hecate, because when you're doing the Scottish play or doing various dramas from that period, the goddess, although they call it, she's called, I think for the verse she's called, anyway, Hecate or Hecate, and Tom Baker's gone, well, I've heard it pronounced Hecate somewhere, and everyone else is going, but it's just the spaceship, isn't it? They'd call it Hecate, we'll call it the Hecate. Tom Baker goes, I'll call it Hecate, and Alan Bromley walks off. So clearly here is, it's part of that, what I was referring to at the beginning, sort of slightly testing. I'll go, well, I'll say chameleon, wouldn't it be witty? And Paddy Russell's going, have I got the energy to fight this? Because it does actually pull focus from the cliffhanger slightly, because you're going, does he mean chameleon? And decides not to fight that battle. And it comes from, I was in a green room with Tom, and he was talking about working with Olivier, and Olivier pronounced the word beryl, Beryl, and he thought, I rather liked it when he took an ordinary word and pronounced it slightly off kilter. It pricked up your ears, it made you listen. And so I think it's a trick he learned from Olivier, or something that Olivier had done that he found beguiling, so decided to do it himself. But being typically Tom, I think, decided to do it slightly belligerently and to test people. Now, I like early Chameleon. I'm not wild about Chameleon Factor, although it does sound good, Chameleon Factor. But even though it's wrong, it actually looks wronger with the subtitles, because you can see the word written down. You go, what's he doing? But that's my theory of it. And I think I've asked him about this in an interview I've done with him for a future project. So listen out, because I think I do ask him about Beryl and Chameleon Factor and early Chameleon. And I hate this bit because it's such a needless... I mean, why's the Doctor done that as well? The Doctor's partially responsible, but it's appropriate. Skin Sale, the man of honour, the military hero, the one that knows death, but the one that, has to protect his honour and that we like because he's sardonic and he's brave. He teams up with the Doctor and Leela, and he comes up with the idea of the diamond. He's the guest, he's the guest hero. Dies scrabbling around for money, for jewels, for trinkets. Now, and in the book, this is slightly different, because I'm sure she says, where's Skin Sale? And he says, dead. And she goes, with honour. And he goes, yes. But he's lying to her, because Terence Dick says, the Doctor image of Skin Sale scrabbling around, it was not a way to go. But he lies to tell Leela he died with honour, to at least give him a sort of fitting, well, not a fitting, but a kind report in death, a kind memorial, as it were. But Tom's decided to... I don't know if I should have checked the script. I have it. Whether in the script it's like that, and Tom's gone, I'm just going to say dead with honour, and they've gone, fine. Or whether Terence rethought it and just made a slightly different grace note of it in the book, which he's prone to do. Terence quite often corrects mistakes in the book. He ties up loose ends, and maybe thought, actually, that's a better way of doing this dead with honour bit, is to actually make it a lie to Leela when she asks. She introduces the concept of honour, and the Doctor goes, yeah, okay. Which I think works slightly better, because I think it highlights the concept of honour and the irony of it, especially when the Doctor, when asked, slightly misreports it, which I think underlines the sort of ironic nature of the death more than him just throwing out dead with honour. So that's one that works slightly better in the book, I think. It looks pretty good, the sort of grim bits of the Rutan flapping about and leaving bits of jelly on the stairs. That works very nicely. And it's uncomfortable, isn't it? Leela sort of glorying in the death of her enemy, which she would do. This is nice characterisation. Nice people that we like, do things that we find distasteful. And of course, in Leela's morality, this is a sneaky, cowardly enemy that disguises itself as people and picks people off without, facing them in battle, as it were. So it is a contemptible thing, and she glories in its destruction. But she's also the second lead in a children's science fiction show, and the sort of empathic female character who we see larging it up over her defeated enemy. And that I like the fact that makes you uneasy. And Louise Jameson is a clever enough actress that you don't lose your sympathy with Leela, even though what she's doing is disconcerting. It's a nice piece of writing. I've just watched a series on Disney called The Bear, about chefs. And what I love about that is that all of the characters have nice aspects and nice elements, and all of them have terrible aspects and terrible elements, and sometimes exhibit both within the space of a scene. But it's never... And it takes clever writing and acting in order to do that and let it speak for itself and not seem contradictory. But the characters, because they're truthfully done, it works. It never takes you out of it and makes you think that it's wrong. I love this. I love that Leela's gone, back for a knife, and now does the Doctor go back for her? She's so cool. I love the way he sort of runs in to go back for her. She's already gone out. Love little touches like that. And now we back on film. Yes, we are. Oh, and I'd remembered, of course. This is the famous sequence of Leela's eyes getting changed because she was. That's a great model shot as well. And actually, the effects aren't bad. I don't think it's great with the shooting star coming past the lamp room, a couple of minutes ago. But it was fine. But that's actually a very, very good model shot. But this is great. Again, Leela, such an interesting, fascinating character, saying, "Kill me because I'm blind." Now, again, that says a lot about the sort of cold pragmatism of where she's come from. We don't think badly of her for us, although the idea now that and it speaks to, actually, I won't bang on because it's a pet subject of mine, but it is the way that a disability is seen as something that makes you less able, and in the cold pragmatism of a tribe like the Sever team, you're better off dead. Now, of course, that is not something that we in the enlightened 21st century should think about people with disabilities, and we know that people with disabilities are more capable in other areas and shouldn't be defined by the one disability that they have. There's all of that, all of that. But again, it's a nice little window into the different morality that this Leela, who is a character that we like and enjoy, and who is kind and thoughtful and intuitive and funny, is also, grimly pragmatic about, right, I can't see, kill me. And of course, the way that the Doctor reacts to that is a sort of charming juxtaposition to that. I love a model shot. I love a little model TARDIS. And this one's got a slightly out of focus lighthouse in the background. I think that why do I love that more than I would love it if it was CGI? I don't know. It's something about the proportions, the fact that you can sort of feel it and touch it, the texture of it. I love that final shot, and I adore the fact. See, Vince gets credited after Adelaide there, because in that episode, he doesn't survive more than a couple of minutes. John Walker's the film cameraman. I had the pleasure of interviewing him recently, but I don't think I asked him about Horror Fang Rock because there's not much goes on with it. I think I did ask him and he didn't remember anything about it. Paul Allen, I think Phil Newman might have interviewed Paul Allen. But I adore the Ballad of Flannan Isle and the little echo that they give it. And it's just a way, isn't it? Isn't it wonderful in science fiction? Now you can do a little literary reference to something and it just gives it a little bit more impact, a bit more import. It gives it a sort of depth and a history. And if something's got a history, it makes it old, and therefore it makes it resonant, and it makes it atmospheric, and it makes it classical. And that's why this working as a period piece helps as well as setting it at the dawn of electricity, which is thematically apposite. Oh, it's great, and everybody dies. Ha 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 ha. But that ending is glorious. And, of course, it makes you, if you encounter that poem at school, it gives it an extra frisson when you encounter it. And as I say, I can't quite remember which order, but it's always a poem I sort of go, oh, and I can quote bits of this as well, because it's got the Doctor Who connection. It gave it a slight edge and it made me slightly more interested. Doctor Who engages you. If Doctor Who can connect to something that you're learning about in school, it gives that thing in school slightly more, it gives you slightly more of an interest in it. So in a way, Sidney Newman's desires live on, even if not as overtly as in the way that the storytelling that he imagined. But what it's saying is, if you harness kids' imagination, and you're making kids television with intelligence and written by intelligent people and performed by skilled people, it means that when they link that adventure that so beguiles and entrances and bewitches you, if they then invoke something else, that thing is gets a sheen of quality by association, and makes you therefore more interested in it. And that's great. And I think, and that's why having, Nikola Tesla or Mary Shelley or any of these people in Doctor Who, which I mentioned two very recent examples, is important and part of what Doctor Who should be doing. And I know some very clever scientific people who were drawn to the science of Doctor Who. I'm not scientific at all, but there are poems, there are Shakespeare quotes that light up for me a bit more because they've been mentioned in Doctor Who. So that then when I was doing them at school, I perhaps dived into them a little bit further. Whatever it is that's your thing, because Doctor Who has such a broad palette and the character is so interesting and so knowledgeable about so many different things. He's a great entry-level introduction to something that might then become your associated passion, as well as presenting you an adventure about a shape-shifting jellyfish that kills everybody. I mean, from the sublime to the ridiculous, eh? But that's why I love popular culture, because, something that's self-consciously high art can by its nature be exclusionary. Oh God, I've had free tickets to an art gallery and found that out for myself. Are you sure you should be here? Whereas something that's popular culture now, you can do stuff that has no pretensions beyond, as Terence Dick said, avoiding putting the test card out. I think he did himself down a little bit there. But there's certainly lots of television made then and now where the people making it are just earning a living and just slapping stuff out there, often with contempt for the audience. I don't think Doctor Who very rarely has contempt for the audience. The people making it are at least trying to have some fun, at the very least, and transmit that to the crowd. But at its best, there's so much else going on, because the process of writing something that requires such imagination, I think, fires all the other synapses. The process of acting something that you have to make not ridiculous, it means that you sharpen up your performance in other areas. The process of making something where you have to carry off hard special effects, or a horror story on a on the budget of something that's usually just four people in a room talking about stuff. Everybody has to be across everything, and so I think it just like exercise makes if you're exercising your arms, it doesn't matter because the endorphins are going to other parts of your body as well. I think that's what working on Doctor Who's a bit like. You're sharpening up your skill in one particular area, but it can't help to influence all of the other bits, and then that sprinkles all sorts of different layers of magic dust on your audience. Can you tell I like the horror of Fang Rock? I'm invigorated by watching that. I haven't been very well lately. I'm still a bit tired. I'm still a bit in recovery, really, and it's taken longer than I would like. I am invigorated by the 4 episodes I've just spent in the company of Messrs. Baker, Dix, Jameson. Can a lady be a messer? I don't know. Rowe, Douglas, Abbott, Fanning, Caffrey, Woollett, even Ralph Watson. Yeah, God bless. So look, I've got 2 things, and I'm going to do a podcast about this. I haven't written it yet, but about getting so close to victory and mucking it up, because I think Doctor Who's a bit like that as well, because I don't think there is a perfect Doctor Who story. I think it's impossible, and it's partially because the fandom is so self-loathing that we could never find it perfect anyway. There would always be something to go, oh, but it's a shame about that bit. So it's as much about our symbiotic relationship with the programme. But I certainly identify with the idea of Doctor Who is ramshackle, the Doctor is not the traditional hero. The TARDIS is not the best ship in the fleet. It's slightly broken. You have to hit it with a hammer to make it work properly. I will never quite be good enough for any of the things I do to be truly happy. I will never be quite successful enough and I've had so many great kind of opportunities and things that on paper look amazing, but usually messed something up, or I take away an embarrassment, or I'm slightly ashamed of the way that came out, or for some reason it went really, really, really well, but then didn't lead to that next thing, and I've got no understanding why, but because nothing's ever bloody perfect. And that's that. And Doctor Who, to me, personifies that. And the horror Fang Rock has an element of that to it as well. But I'm just sort of speaking out loud to remind myself I've got to do an indefinable magic about, I had a whole bit in My Stepson Stole My Sonic Screwdriver that I cut out at the last minute about the giant rat, and basically saying, in every, even in a Doctor Who story that fires on all cylinders so brilliantly, there's a bit that just makes you go, oh, why does that have to be so crap? And of course in Talons it's the giant rat, but I think there's something in every Doctor Who story that's just a bit that makes you go, oh, I wish that was better. But I think life is like that as well, and I think that's rich pickings for a podcast about how Doctor Who mirrors life, but how actually there is something. Failure is one of the basic freedoms. There is something about not being quite perfect and accepting that nothing is quite perfect. That is quite charming and quite freeing, and allows you to be rueful rather than cross. And I think we are better if we are rueful rather than cross. I'm thinking out loud now, so this might be repeated in the podcast that eventually arrives. Horror of Fang Rock. What do I like about episode 4? Well, do I say the fact that everyone dies? Is that a thing I like about the story? I think it is. I like the clever denouement that uses the setting and the light as actually part of the way of dispatching the alien. I like the way the Rutan speaks. I think it gives it it shows some effort has gone, and it's not too hokey. Sometimes when people give alien speech patterns, it can be a bit, particularly in American stuff, it can be a bit, it could be a bit boringly lofty or a bit comically over sincere. I quite like the way that Terence has just gone, I'm going to make this thing enunciate itself. I'm going to make this thing express itself in slightly different ways. I think that works. I like the fact that the Rutan ties in with the Sontarans for no purpose whatsoever other than to just make a nice little thread in the Doctor Who family tree. The little Doctor Who connections. I love the character of Colonel Skinsale. I love Alan Rowe as an actor, and the fact that he was one of those actors that works with 3 doctors and pops up in nice bits over a relatively lengthy period, and the fact that one early piece of detective work I did when I was going through an old Spotlight, I noticed that Alan Rowe's Spotlight photo was taken by Geoffrey Bayldon, because you have to credit the photographer in Spotlight, and Geoffrey Bayldon was taken by Alan Rowe, and I went, oh, now is that a thing? And I was right. Yes, they were partners. If I told you how annoyed I was with the Guardian when Geoffrey Bayldon died, and it said he leaves a brother or whatever, but it doesn't mention he outlived his partner of 50 years, Alan Rowe. The Guardian said to me, well, no, we spoke to the Catweasel Society, and it was like, yeah, well, I don't think the Catweasel Society I either knew or were particularly enamoured, because quite a lot of TV programme societies don't give a monkeys about the person outside of the TV show that these people are interested in. And I was very cross, because it's basically, if and particularly if, you wouldn't do that with a non-gay couple. It would be no question that somebody's opposite sex partner of 50 years would not be considered worth mentioning. Now, I think they didn't know, but I think it was easier to overlook because it was 2 men. And that's The Guardian, which is a very liberal newspaper and doesn't hide such things. But it just goes to show how insidious some of this stuff sometimes is without us even realising it, and even within the most liberal of environments. And they sort of said to me, well, if you want to write in a letter, we'll print it. And I was like, no, I'm not going to. No, I think it seemed to me the wrong way of doing it. It should have been in the main body piece. I just felt they should have just added it later, rather than it be me writing in to point out the mistake. It should just be a correction and a clarification. As I'm saying that now, I feel I should have written in, but I was annoyed at the time about the way that they'd gone about it. And I work for them. I write for them. Do you know what I mean? I write these things. But yes, it just occurs to me that's that's just a little sign that when, things are not as equal as we sometimes, I think, pat ourselves on the back that they are. So I'm going to acknowledge here that Alan Rowe, Colonel Skinsale, and Geoffrey Baildon, Organon, Catweasel, Big Finish's first Doctor, were a partnership for, I think, 50 years at least. Alan Rowe is actually from New Zealand. Played a lot of English gentlemen, but from New Zealand. I love Alan Rowe. I think he's a good... Skinsale is one of my favourite Doctor Who characters. I think I like those sorts of characters anyway, especially as I am drawn to them, but they reveal to have a hypocrisy underneath, and yet I still can't hate him. And I think that speaks to so much, as I referred to earlier, about our society and about Englishness and Britishness and class and all of those stuff. So I'm uneasy about why I like that character so much, because Terence Dicks doesn't hide his hypocrisies, but yet I still really like him and I want him to survive. And he's charming and he's funny and he's very watchable. So I think Colonel Skinsale and Colonel Skinsale's... I mean, I hate Skinsale's death, but I'm supposed to hate it. It's an ignominious, horrible thing, and it wouldn't have happened if the blooming Doctor hadn't thrown the blooming diamonds down. But it's a great part of the story. So, Skinsale's death, can I tie that in with Everybody Dies? Yeah, because he's the last character to die. And, you kind of expect him to survive, really. So the fact that everybody dies and the last of them is Skinsale, and Skinsale is such a good character, and Skinsale's death is so horrible. I'm counting all of those things as one thing, just because I'm trying to give myself a chance for once. And I also like the fact that it ends with the echoey Ballad of Flannan Isle, which I think is just the cherry on the top. That's my bonus thing, is that coda is the cherry on the top of a particularly delicious cake made out of the bodies of the entire supporting cast. So it's a delicious Doctor Who cake. It's made of some of the most awful, gruesome ingredients, and yet it tastes so good. So Skinsale / Everybody Dies. I mean, all the characters are great. I love Harker. I think Harker's one of my favourite characters in Doctor Who, because he's the other end of the scale. He's so sort of straightforward, but and heroic, but in a totally sort of undemonstrative way. I like that. I love the bit where they go out in episode 3, the Doctor and Skinsale and Harker, and they just do it because they have to do it, and there's no question. That kind of sort of underplayed bravery, I like. That appeals to the sort of boy's own stuff in me, I guess. And then the Ballad of Flannan Isle, which I think, I talked about the educational content of Doctor Who, and the fact that tying into something literary just gives it a bit of heft beyond its sort of popular culture environs. But I mean, there's so much. Paddy Russell, I think, deserves a nod for wrangling Tom Baker. I've already mentioned Terence Dicks. Maybe I should give Paddy the nod. It's so easy to take directors for granted, and her direction is not like, I probably, I know I've picked Michael Ferguson for his because of the way that he moves his camera and the avant-garde way he edits occasionally, but why is, mood and atmosphere and working with actors that Paddy Russell does somehow not seen as good as camera work that draw and stunt sequences that draw your attention to them, easier to notice. That a lot of what works there is Paddy Russell doing it but not showing her working in a way. Oh, should I choose Paddy? So Everybody Dies, Skinsale and his death. Can I tie those together? I think I can. Ballad of Flannan Isle, Paddy Russell. Gosh. Because the directors we tend to choose are the ones who show their working, and like great lighting in a theatre, it's really, really good if you don't come out going, hey, the lighting was good, wasn't it? And I know that Paddy was having to wrangle, different setting, because everyone had to pack up and move to Birmingham with a relatively inexperienced at making this kind of programme crew. And she was having to deal with Tom Baker and Louise Jameson not getting on, and Tom Baker not getting on with Paddy. Whereas I think Louise liked her. I know that Elizabeth Sladen and Paddy didn't get on so much. Damn it, I'm very fond of Paddy Russell. I've got what's left of her paperwork upstairs in a cat's litter tray. She bought us sandwiches and crisps when we went to her house, and she worked on the Quatermass serials. And this is her last episode of Doctor Who, and she was a woman in a man's world, which is why she was called Paddy Russell. I have a brother called Paddy, but he's Patrick. But she was Paddy because she was Patricia, because actually when men saw, if men were to see Patricia on a call sheet, they would have it in their mind to play up before she even entered the studio. So she was Paddy Russell, so that she had to alter that mindset. That buys into, again, stuff I was talking about with Baildon and Rowe. There were sort of little prejudices that I will never have had to have faced, but are worth talking about, not because I'm woke or because I'm right on, or because actually this sort of stuff was real and is embedded and is still probably part of our DNA, even if it's been watered down a little bit. But it's all where we've come from, and it all informs everything that we do. And if you look at a program now and go, well, how come the three main protagonists are women? Or why is it, why does this have to, why is everyone celebrating that it's a woman writer and a woman director? Because we've come from a not too distant past where that sort of stuff would be seen as ludicrous. Why? Well, because you don't get many women writers and directors, and nobody's interested in all-female drama, all of that. And we're richer for more experience. And of course, why should one half of the population be less expected to be creative on paper or to be good at directing? Do you know what I mean? Why is that something that should be dictated by, whether you're male or female? That seems very odd. But of course, it's a very rare thing. So I'm not being woke when I'm going, there aren't many female directors in the whole history of classic Doctor Who. And I understand that it was part of the time, and I'm not angry with the fact that there weren't, but it's worth noting that there weren't, and it's worth noting what the norms of the time were. And that then reminds us actually how extraordinary it was then that there was somebody like Paddy, and why she had to perhaps be quite so no-nonsense as she was. I found her a bit terrifying, but she was lovely. She bought us sandwiches and crisps. I think I put the terrifying upon her, and she could give a withering stare. I remember when she's got a telesnap of her in Dr. Korjak and the Children, and I said, "Oh, did you take that?" And she looked at me as if to say, well, how could I have taken that? Because I was in the studio doing that when that, and you go, oh, yeah, maybe it wasn't Dr. Korjak, but it was something that she couldn't possibly have taken because it's of her on a monitor. And she just gave me that's a really stupid question. I was like, oh, fair enough. But yeah, she could put you down with a stare, but she was lovely. And she wasn't the best interviewee. She's quite monosyllabic on that Invasion of the Dinosaurs track, which is why in the final episode that we had with her, instead of talking about what's going on screen, fortunately, because I knew about other stuff from her career, because I'd already interviewed her about Quatermass and we talked about her early days, we talk about her whole career. And I know some people go, why don't they talk about Invasion of the Dinosaurs? Because she was going yes and no. That's why. And we improvised on the day, and I think we did a damn good job. Because if you looked over the filmed interview we did with her, a lot of her replies were quite succinct and to the point. So look, yes, the more I think about it, it's Paddy Russell's last episode of Doctor Who. She was a trailblazer. She was one of very few females in key positions in classic Doctor Who. But that's not to patronise her and say, well, that's a reason to choose her, but it's worth noting. It's worth talking about. She is, I think, one of the premier directors of classic Doctor Who. I mean, she does The Massacre, Invasion of the Dinosaurs, which, dinosaurs aside, is an excellent story. And Pyramids and Horror are just chef's kiss Doctor Who. So yeah, sorry, Ballad of Flannan Isle, although I love you. You're not a big enough moment, although you cast a shadow beautifully over it. You cast the shadow of the lighthouse back upon the previous 4 episodes. So it's beautifully done, and Tom Baker is the Doctor you want to be reading The Ballad of Flannan Isle. I love it, but I love Paddy Russell, I think, just a little bit more, and I feel duty bound for Paddy Russell to be my bonus thing. and for Skinscale's death / the fact that everyone dies, which I know is a slightly cheeky thing to evoke for my thing for episode 4. But I want to give myself a chance to win. And wouldn't it be good if I was able to win whilst surviving, which most people don't, the 4 episodes of the horror of Fang Rock. Not the horror of Fang Rock. Martin Geraghty is going to tell us his favourite thing about episode 4 and his bonus.
And on to part 4. After the plot has been resolved and the Routons have been sent packing, the episode ends with Tom reciting the Ballad of Flann and Isle by Wilfred Gibson, or a part of it anyway, which very neatly and spookily rounds the story off. And you do tend to wonder what on earth the rescue party are going to make of all the carnage they find in the lighthouse when they eventually go to investigate various unexplained deaths and dead bodies scattered about the place. So in summary then, for me, Fang Rock is quintessential Doctor Who comfort viewing, if a story where everyone else dies can be considered comfort viewing. It's tense, scary, well acted, brilliantly plotted, and utilises the BBC's design department to great effect. Tom and Louise in particular are superb in it. Leela has so many great moments, disrobing in front of Vince. I am no lady, Vince, she says, which is brilliant. Slapping Adelaide when she gets hysterical, which she does a lot. And gloating at the dying Rutan as it slips down the stairwell like a smashed egg. It's a wonderful story, and as ever, it's been a pleasure to revisit it.
So was Martin's bonus thing, to me, it sounded like the Doctor and Leela. I don't know if he explicitly stated a bonus thing there. So maybe this time, because last time I thought Jess Jerkovic hadn't done a bonus thing, and he had. I think this time maybe. But from what Martin was saying there, I think that, the Doctor and Leela may be his bonus thing, which I suggested in episode 1. But, of course, I rejected the Ballad of Flann and Isle in favour of Paddy Russell. So I lost. I fell at the final hurdle, but I did so doing the right thing. I did so by going with my heart. But nothing encapsulates more what I presaged the whole thing with by going, I usually screw up frustratingly at the last minute. And I mean, frustratingly, not just because I chose the wrong thing, but because I actually chose the right thing. And then at the very last minute, unchose it and chose something else instead. Story of my life. But at least it's only a podcast and it doesn't really matter, because it's not the winning, it's the taking part. I think that's going to go on my tombstone. Here lies Toby Hadoke. It's not the winning, it's the taking part. And he took a part in a lot and never won anything. But the winner here is Horror of Fang Rock. It's a brilliant story. I like the fact that Martin and I were kind of on, we're pretty much in the same environs with the things that we enjoyed. Although interesting because he's a cartoonist. He's got a great way with words there, hasn't he? I liked him describing the Rutan falling down like a slippery smashed egg or whatever, and he described a few things in some of his other choices with a lovely turn of phrase. So he's been a delightful guest as Martin, who is a very, very nice chap. Check his work out online. I think you could buy some of his work online, his Doctor Who comic strip stuff, and of course, give him a salute when you watch the Doctor Who animations and when you see his work in Doctor Who magazine. He's an important contributor to the surrounding universe of Doctor Who, and a very nice fella to boot, and a great guest for Happy Times and Places. So it turns out I didn't have to hunt very high or very low to find the life at the heart of this podcast, which has I think ended on perhaps a slightly more positive note than the story that houses it, where nobody makes it out alive, but we all have, and we live to podcast another day. So I'm going to go and walk Bernard the dog before it gets dark. My other half's not here, so I'm going to take Bernard out, and what I will do is I will leave a door ajar, an untouched meal, and an over-toppled chair. Well, thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest this time around is Martin Geraghty, whose work you can find in the pages of Doctor Who magazine, on the DVD animations, and online. I'm grateful to Martin, lovely fella, and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Kazin, Jacob Lumley, Daryl McLean, Philip Marsh, Joe McLachlan, Glenn McLeod, Steve Manfred, Nick Mellish, James Miller, Phil Mitchell, Justin E. Monaghan, Chris Murphy, Paul Murphy, Andrew Nixon, Tom Neenan, Steve O'Brien, Jeremiah O'Connor, Andy Parkinson, Phil Pascoe, Richard Patey, Ken Patterson, Thomas Payne, John Pettigrew, Mary Ann Placati, Liam Price, Ian Radford, Peter Reed, Paula Reynolds, Murray Robertson, Alex Rowan, and Darren Rule. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Well, go on then. You could become a patron and have your name read out on the closing credits like that for as little as £3 a month. There are higher tiers, and the higher up you go, the more often your name gets mentioned in the credits. But other than that, all the bonuses, early releases, your own special podcast called Far Too Much Information, and exclusives, AMAs, pictures of my dog. They're all available at the lowest tier, which is £3. But whatever tier you sign up to, you can get a 10% discount if you sign up for a year in one go. That's at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You can also go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke if you don't want to sign up to a monthly commitment. And you can follow these podcasts on Twitter at Hadoke Podcasts. But look, the Ko-fi thing and the Patreon thing, they're just the way that we do things these days, as more and more of us are taking to the airwaves and making our own content and, I was going to say, leaping over the gates and punching the gatekeepers in the face as we do so, and just bunging our stuff out there. But of course, that means, we need to come to you, cap in hand, and say, if you like this stuff, if you could throw some pennies our way, or in my case, my way, this way, on patreon.com/Toby Hadoke or kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. It sounds like a hustle. It's, as I say, it's just that it's a really awkward thing to do, but there we go. I'm not the only one doing it, and it helps me to do these things properly, hopefully produce them to a professional standard, and I keep these ad-free. I mean, let's be honest, I'll keep them ad-free anyway, because I don't like podcasts with adverts in, but contributing makes that a sensible decision rather than a stupid one. But I'm not going to have adverts, but at least justify my naivety. But look, seriously though, bills are going up, nights are drawing in, the world's going down the toilet, and not many people have much spare money for fripperies, and I totally understand that. What does help, though, that costs you nothing, is to go to iTunes, to Podbean, to Spotify, all the places where you can score these podcasts 5 stars. Toby Hadoke's Times Travels, 5 stars. That really helps. It sexes up my algorithms and, makes them all painted and gorgeous. And let's leave that metaphor there. And as well as 5 stars for tweaking those old algorithms and making them poke out, a few lines saying why you like these, so that passing punters go, oh, I might have a bite of that cherry, would be very useful and helpful, and as I say, cost you nothing but a little bit of your time. Well, I've disappeared down a rabbit hole. I was supposed to just be sort of finishing this off, but Shez was downstairs, and so I didn't want to record while she was making a noise. So then I started doing something else that would take me a couple of minutes while she was just getting her bits and bobs together. And I think I think that took me about 40 minutes. So I'm now doing this because I've got to go to bed. But because I'm going to Buckingham Palace this week with Shirley, because she has been bestowed an MBE. She's going to be a member of the British Empire, which all sounds very grand and is a deserved nod to her for the work that she has done representing disabled people in television drama, and not just keeping that to herself, because she set up a charity which gets disabled people access to the arts and has got the industry to sign up to a pledge to use more disabled talent, to audition disabled actors for roles, to use disabled actors behind the scenes and to improve disabled creatives behind the scenes and to improve the accessibility of the industry to disabled people who are all too often overlooked. And you wouldn't believe some of the access issues at a basic level that have been very badly done. But she's got pledges from some major companies, and she's got major companies doing mentoring schemes, and famous people doing mentoring for up and coming disabled talent. And because of that, she's been awarded an MBE, which means we're off to Buckingham Palace, and I will stand behind in her shadow whilst she gets all the deserved credit. And I go, well, I got a few downloads from a podcast about Peter Haining. It's not a competition. But put it like this, I perhaps need to improve my game. But anyway, yes, very proud of her, and isn't that nice? So that's what I'm up to, and I've thoroughly enjoyed doing Horror Fang Rock. But if you are after another podcast, I have been listening to one called Dead Eyes, about it's the comedian Connor Ratcliffe. He's an improv guy and a comedian and a character actor. Back in the day, auditioned for and got a role in the drama Band of Brothers, but before he filmed his scenes, he was fired by Tom Hanks, who was going to be directing the episode he was in, because Tom Hanks looked at his audition tape and decided he had dead eyes. And 20 years later, Connor, who I don't know at all, has gone on a quest to get to the bottom of that and to look at the ramifications. And it's a great quest. It's a lovely little sort of pointless thing that, of course, by being pointless, actually proves to have lots of different points that open up all sorts of different possibilities, and it captures a sort of actor's life, but is also actually quite reassuring about how unimportant seemingly important things are, and yet also how important seemingly unimportant things are. And it's a great piece of broadcasting, and I've really enjoyed it. So that's what I'm listening. That's when I go down my wormhole of other people's creativity at the moment, is Dead Eyes. So there's a recommendation for in-between episodes of Toby Hadoke's Time Travels, which is what this is, ending now.